Welcome to the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. Get in on the conversation. Call 1-877-669-1292.
And welcome to the Howie Silbiger Show. My name is Howie Silbiger. We are live right here on a Sunday evening. It is Lag BaOmer. We are live on the True Talk Radio Network. Feel free to call in. Number to call, 1-877-669-1292. That's 1-877-669-1292 to get in on a conversation here on the Howie Silbiger Show on the True Talk Radio Network. And I have to tell you that I'm not a happy person these days. And I'll tell you why. It all dates back to, April 5th, 2004. A few hours before the beginning of Passover, a fire was set in the United Talmud Saint Laurent campus library. There were about 15,000 books, along with all the library's furniture and computers that were destroyed in the fire, caused about $600,000 in damages. The perpetrators left a note on the door to school and contacted a local TV station. They said their attack was in retaliation to Israel's assassination of Hamas leader Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. Now, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin was the founder of Hamas. He was the spiritual leader of Hamas, and he was murdered. He was assassinated by Israel just before Passover in 2004, and this was a retaliation for his murder. Well, what they considered his murder, for his assassination. I mean, could we consider an assassination a murder? I guess we could. It's interesting because, when you murder a terrorist, then is it really a murder? You're saving lives. So I'm not so sure. Anyway, a kid named Slimon El Merabi and another kid named Simon Zogieb were charged with arson and conspiracy. El Meregli pleaded guilty to the arson charge in January 2005 and was sentenced to 40 months in prison in exchange for prosecutors dropping a conspiracy charge. Police charged Ruba El Meregli, Fad, the boy's mother, for acting as an accessory after the fact because she tried to arrange for her son to leave the country and go to Brazil after the attack. She was convicted in 2008 and served 12 months probation. Charges against Zogieb were dropped due to insufficient evidence in October 2004. A court ordered a reporting ban and limited the available information in the case against Zogieb. So the court protected the second terrorist that set a bomb in a Jewish school. Now, not long before this attack, in response to the September 11th, 2001 terror attacks in the United States, that killed over 3,000 people at the World Trade Center, Canada, in particular, then Justice Minister Aaron Kotler, instituted an anti-terror legislation in Canada. So they passed the Anti-Terrorism Act. So the Anti-Terrorism Act is designed, it's there to prevent terrorists from getting into Canada and to protect Canadians from terrorist acts, to activate tools to identify, prosecute, convict, and punish terrorists, to keep the Canada-U.S. border secure and contributor to economic security, and to work with the international community to bring terrorists to justice and address the root cause of violence. This is what the Anti-Terror Act was. It was Bill C-36. Now, in the Act, it amended the criminal code, which allowed prosecutors to try terrorists under this Act as terrorists. So there were a couple of criteria. One, that they had to attack an identifiable community. Two, that they had to have done it for a political purpose. So it wasn't just hatred. It's not I hate the Jewish people, so I'm going to go bomb a Jewish school. There had to be some political motivation behind their actions. And three, it had to be a political motivation that kind of made sense in the context of the attack. So the attack on the United Talmud in 2004 fit the criteria of the Terrorism Act, of the Anti-Terrorism Act, and would have been the first case tried under the new anti-terrorism legislation passed by Canada. But the Canadian government decided not to pursue the case as a terrorism, even though all aspects of the case, all points of the case, pointed to terrorism. It was retaliation for the assassination of Sheikh Ahmed Yassim, which was the head of Hamas. It was clearly a political retaliation. They blew up a Jewish school, clearly a school that they felt was the epitome of Zionism in North America. So there was no reason not to charge those terrorists under the Terrorism Act. I wrote an op-ed piece at the time that was published in various newspapers asking Erwin Kotler to explain himself, which he never did. I won't say he never did. I say he did so about a dozen years later at a breakfast with me, and he admitted that I was right and he was working under political pressure that he couldn't use the Terrorism Act that he had put into place and his government had put into place to try the people in 2004 who bombed the United Torah in Ville Saint-Laurent. Fast forward a couple of years, another Arab, and all these attacks against the Jewish community, by the way, were all done by Arabs. Another Arab planted a bomb in front of the Y, the YMYWHA, the Jewish Y. The bomb didn't go off, and nobody was injured, and he was caught, and he was not tried under the Canada's Terrorism Act. Fast forward again. And another attack, a firebombing on a Jewish synagogue. No terrorism legislation enacted there. 2 Jewish schools were shot in November. One school was shot twice in 4 days. The other school was shot once. The perpetrator of one of the shootings, probably all the shootings, but at least one of the shootings, was arrested last week. Is he going to be tried under the Terrorism Act? I'm willing to bet against it. Why pass the legislation if you're not going to use it? Or are you going to use it only for people who don't attack Jews? That is the question I have. And that is the question that everybody's asking. We have a legislation for terrorism. Why not use it? It is obvious that people who are shooting the schools and people who are attacking Jewish institutions are doing so as a retaliation for what they perceive as an injustice in the Middle East. If that is the case, then using terror legislation, putting people away forever, throwing them in prison forever, deporting them back to the countries they came from, might be the only deterrent to stop people from committing these heinous crimes. But Canada is a weak country with a weak government, and a weak government won't do it. If you're wondering what it looks like from the point of view of the school, when a school gets shot, I'm going to share some video with you right now. This past Friday, a girls' school in Toronto, a girls' Jewish school in Toronto, was shot. So this is the third school in Canada that has been shot, third Jewish school in Canada that has been shot in the past year. Well, it's actually the second school, third shooting. Let me just do that because there are nitpickers out there who's going to say, oh, it's only one school was shot twice. Okay, so 2 schools were shot in Montreal. 1 school shot twice. So that's 3 shootings. This is the 4th shooting of a school in Canada since November. So let's take a look and see what it looks like from inside a school when people start shooting at it. Here's some video. Two guys got out of the car, they pulled out guns, and they shot at the school. Now imagine they would have done that in the middle of the day. Imagine they would have done that when school was in session. Imagine that they would have done that when children were there. It's too difficult to think about that. That the lives of our children are being put into jeopardy in North America because there are crazies out there that want to take pot shots at schools. It's hard to think that they could show up at 3 o'clock in the morning like these guys did. They could show up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I don't care how many security guards you post in front of a school. I don't care how many cameras you put up, and I don't care how many panic buttons you put up, and I don't care how many moats you're going to dig and how many fences you're going to put up. The school got hit by bullets. They shot through the fence at the school. The school got hit by bullets. Now, I don't see any other religious schools, I don't see any other denomination of religion schools being shot at anywhere. Only Jewish schools. The police spokesman in Toronto got up after the shooting of the school and said, "We're not sure if this is a hate crime. We're still investigating." I'm at a loss for words when it comes to the idiocy of that statement. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to thinking that shooting at a Jewish school, when there has been a history of shooting at Jewish schools, cannot be considered a hate crime immediately. If this was a black school, it would be a hate crime instantly. If this was a Muslim school, it would be Islamophobia immediately. But it's a Jewish school, so we have to look and we have to investigate. It's the Canadian way. After the October 7th massacre, after the October 7th Churban, the attempted genocide of the Jewish people on October 7th, the Canadian government also said, "Oh, we have to look at the evidence before we can condemn this." After Israel was accused of bombing a hospital, and Israel claimed they didn't bomb the hospital, but they were accused of bombing the hospital, and all evidence pointed to the fact that Israel did not bomb the hospital, and video evidence surfaced that showed that Israel did not bomb the hospital, the Canadian government still had to wait 3 weeks before they quietly retracted their statement that maybe Israel wasn't responsible for bombing that hospital. So apparently if it's Jews, it's okay to have a blood libel in Canada. It's no problem. If it's Jews, sure, accuse them. If it's Israelis, accuse them. Israel's the all evil of all evils. Accuse them of everything. It's Israel's fault. It can't be a hate crime. These people didn't hate Jews. They're just upset about what's happening in the Middle East. So it's not a hate crime. So let's go shoot up an elementary school. That's okay. It's only Jewish children. Jewish blood is cheap. Jews aren't going to riot in the street. They're not going to be like the blacks and riot in the street. They're not going to go and burn down towns and burn down half a country. They're going to sit quietly and then cry in their synagogues. So might as well go and shoot up Jewish schools in Canada. The Canadian government doesn't care. Nobody cares. It's unbelievable. It's actually disgusting. And because Jews are civilized and don't destroy things when they're angry, everyone thinks they could just walk over Jews, including the government of Canada. Now, of course, the statements came out. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. Those statements came out already. We heard the cries of Toronto MPs and Toronto council people, the people on Toronto City Council, who voted just a couple of weeks ago to not create buffer zones around Jewish institutions and other institutions, to allow people to walk right up to these places and protest in the faces of people. We got to back up for a second. We got to think for a second. We got to be a little realistic for a second, just for a second. Why are Jewish institutions in North America being attacked? What do these institutions have to do with anything happening in the Middle East? The answer is nothing. The answer is that for years we've been saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Jewism. We've been saying that for years. And for years everybody's been saying, oh no, you could disagree with the policies of the State of Israel and still love the Jews. And that's what I've heard for years. And every time we get on the show, every time anybody gets up and says, no, the anti-Zionism is the new anti-Jewism. And it's been like that for a couple of decades already. And if you hate Zionism, you hate Jews. And it's just a cover for your hatred of Jews. Everyone always screams, oh, you're so intolerant. What are you talking about? You could disagree with us. And I get this from Jews a lot, by the way. You You could disagree with the politics of the state of Israel, but you don't have to necessarily hate the Jewish people. You might hate Israel, but not the Jewish people. And while it's true you have to separate Jews and Judaism from Israel and Zionism, they are separate things. In the majority of cases where Jews are being attacked outside of Israel, in the vast majority of cases, the Jews are being attacked because somebody has a beef with Israel. The Jewish community is being attacked because of Israel or something happening in the Middle East. That is why Jews are being attacked. That is the only reason Jews are being attacked. Well, at least it's the guise of the only reason that Jews are being attacked. The truth is that Jews are hated, that we're hated people. That's the honest truth. The truth is that if any North American country could decide tomorrow to get rid of the Jewish population, they would in a second. They wouldn't even think about it. Don't forget, Canada has a long history of not liking Jews. During World War II, a ship, left Nazi Europe and moved its way down to Canada. And there was a conference in Evian, France, to discuss the Jewish refugee problem. You see, it was a problem that there were a bunch of Jewish refugees. Canada was a big, empty country at the time. And the St. Louis, which was the ship that was moving, was heading its way down to Cuba, Canada. They were looking for some place to go, trying to get visas to go anywhere, trying to save the Jews that were on the ship from going into the ovens of Auschwitz. And at the Evian conference, the Canadian government made it clear. They were asked, how many Jews will Canada take in? Big, empty country like Canada. You have 20,000 people living in this huge, vast land. How many people is Canada going to take in? And the answer was, none is too many. That's how many Jews we'll save. None. That's too many already. So there's your answer. The sentiment existed back then. The sentiment exists today. There are more than none Jews in Canada today. There's a lot of Jews in Canada today. But when their life is put in danger, when their synagogues and their schools and their institutions are being attacked, and Jews are being attacked in the streets, none is too many. When we take a look at the encampments at the university campuses, and universities refusing to take down the encampments of Jew haters that are spewing garbage and hate and lies against the Jewish people in tents on campus, and the campus authorities refuse to take down, the cities refuse to order the police to take them down. Always remember, none is too many. The Jewish community is a thorn in the side of the Canadians. And they would be very happy if the Jews just got up and left. I've said it before on the show, and I'm going to say it again. It is going to be very difficult after all this blows over and things get back to some semblance of normalcy, and I don't know if they ever will. It's going to be awfully difficult for many Jews to walk into the supermarket and know that half the people in the supermarket were calling for their death. We're calling to globalize the Intifada. Random attacks on Jewish people. That's what the Intifada is. When you yell globalize the Intifada at these rallies, what you're calling for is random attacks. Random, violent, deadly attacks on the Jewish people. If we think back to the first two Intifadas in Israel, we realize that the things that constitute an Intifada, the things that made an Intifada, were bus bombings and stabbings and shootings of Jews. This is what they want to globalize the Intifada. Destroy Jews everywhere. And it's very consistent, by the way. To yell globalize the Intifada at a Hamas rally is very consistent with the Hamas Charter, which calls for the death of Jews everywhere. Not the death of Jews in Israel, not the liberation of Palestinian lands or whatever that is, and the destruction of the people who are occupying Palestine. The death of Jews everywhere. When a Jew gets up and hides behind a rock, the rock is going to yell, "There's a Jew behind me, come and kill it." It's the first thing it says in the Hamas Charter. Kill Jews everywhere. It's a quote from the Quran, so it's a holy quote. So once we realize that and we understand that Jews are constantly in danger as long as Hamas exists and as long as there are so many Hamas supporters in America, then it's worrisome that the Jewish community hasn't reacted in a more forceful way. That the Jewish community, the organized Jewish community, the official Jewish community, hasn't done more to protect the Jewish community, hasn't done more to ensure that Jews know how to protect themselves and Jews know how to defend themselves. It's quite disturbing that they collect tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they've done nothing, pretty much nothing, to ensure the safety of Jews. Yeah, they've paid and they've subsidized security systems in all the in all the Jewish buildings around town. Yay. That's going to save somebody when a gunman shows up, like those two guys in Toronto, and opens fire on a Jewish school. Yeah, the alarm will go off and the police will come. But what about the bullets? What about the bullets? Elementary schools are an interesting place. They're filled with very young children. Very young children who trust that the staff and the caretakers in the school are going to fulfill their needs and protect them and be there for them. And when I look at elementary schools and I see little kids, I wonder what kind of monster could shoot at a school like that. Because even if the kids are not in the school, even if the kids are at home, as they were in the 3 school shootings that we've talked about, and the 4 school shootings now, there were no kids in the school. The kids still have to come back to school the next day. And when they come back to school, they still see the damage in the doors. They still see the holes in the windows. And they still understand that the bullet that came flying through that window could have come flying through while they were sitting there. It's extremely scary, and this is the concept, this is the whole idea behind terrorism. And this is why everybody caught with doing something like this should be charged with terrorism under the Terrorism Act. Because the idea of shooting an empty building isn't so much to cause the physical damage on a building. I mean, windows could be replaced, holes could be puttied up, and the building could be back in spick-span shape. It's to scare the residents of the building, to scare the people inside the building. And when your target of fear and terror is little kids, it's 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds, then you have to be a really depraved, sick person. But we understand that Hamas supporters are depraved, sick people because they are justifying and denying that October 7th ever happened and justifying it if they do admit that it actually happened. So on October 7th, depraved Hamas terrorists entered Israel and raped, murdered, beheaded, and committed all sorts of atrocities against the people of southern Israel. Now, the people they killed and the people they murdered and the people they tortured, I'm not even talking about the taking of the hostages, I'm just talking about the people in the towns that they mutilated. Now, those people were peaceniks. They were people who believed that Jews and Arabs could coexist. They were people who worked towards mending the relationship between the Jewish population and the Arab population, trying to coexist and live together. Many of them would pick up Arabs on the border of Gaza and bring them to Jewish hospitals, and many of the doctors that were killed were treating these Arabs in Jewish hospitals. They were humanitarians who would cook and bake for the people of Gaza, who would try to take care of the people of Gaza. But that didn't matter. Political ideology didn't matter. Their belief that Gaza should live as free and independent people didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was they were Jews living on the border of Gaza. And they were slaughtered like Jews get slaughtered any time. Reminds me of Germany in the 1930s, when Hitler came to power in 1933. started passing laws that restricted Jews from doing certain things, performing in plays and different professions. And the Jews who were the intellectuals, there were a lot of Jews who were very intellectual in Germany at that time and very secular. And they would say, and they would write in their newspapers and ask the question, we are more German than we are Jewish. Why are the Germans bothering us? The Jews, I mean, if you want to talk about the ultra-Orthodox Jews, the religious Jews, then we can talk about the religious Jews. But we're not religious Jews. Why are you bothering us? Because to Hitler, too, it didn't really matter. It didn't matter if you're religious, not religious. It didn't matter if you believed in God, you didn't believe in God. Nothing mattered. The fact is you were born a Jew, you'll die a Jew, and we're going to kill you and make sure you die a Jew. That's the only thing Hitler cared about. And that's the only thing Hamas cares about, is that Jews die, period. They don't care what political affiliation you are. They don't care how much you care about them. If you're Jewish, they want to kill you. And Hamas supporters are the same way. They caught the shooter of one of the elementary schools in Montreal last week. And nobody was surprised that he wasn't Irish or he wasn't French or he wasn't Italian. But he was a Muslim young man, a 20-year-old Muslim guy. It's not shocking. It's very unfortunate that it's not shocking. It should be shocking. It should be shocking anytime a young 20-year-old guy decides to open fire on a school. It's shocking. But nobody was surprised. Because as you ratchet up the rhetoric, and as you have people like Adil Shakawi who get out and ratchet up the rhetoric, calling for intifada, calling for destruction, calling for the death of the Jewish people, radical young men, and it's mostly radical young men, will listen to them and take what they say seriously and commit acts of terror against the Jewish people. The proof is in the pudding. So as long as we allow pro-Hamas protesters to occupy university campuses, as long as we allow pro-Hamas protesters to march in the street every week yelling death to the Jews, globalize the Intifada, October 7th never happened, Jewish conspiracies to rule the world, and whatever other conspiracy theories or blood libels they want to throw on the Jews. As long as we continue to allow this to happen, as long as the governments are inactive and don't take action, we're going to have more acts of violence against the Jewish people. In Toronto, a Jewish school was shot on Friday. Don't be surprised if more happens. And God forbid anybody should get injured. But if they do get injured, who do we blame? Who do we point a finger at? Who do we say, oh my gosh, something should have been done? Jewish community leaders, political leaders. That's who we have to point at. That's who will be responsible if somebody gets injured. Jewish community leaders, because the community has not been loud enough and has not been mobilized to go out and to show that we are upset and to make a statement. And I'm not saying make a statement to the press. The press doesn't care about our statements. They make a statement on the street. Take back the streets. The Jewish community doesn't do that. The organized Jewish community doesn't do that. And anybody who tries to do it, anybody who tries to have a march or a rally or something, they get called a radical. They get called a radical and they get blacklisted from the community. Scary. Let's go to the phones. Hi, who's this?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Howie.
How's it going?
You know how it goes. Listening to you is depressing. However, it's extremely real what's going on. It's also very frightening. And it's also reminiscent of 1938, 1939 Nazi Germany.
You see, when I'm in school and I'm standing in front of a class and the class says to me, what is the point of learning history? And, this is always what I point to. I say, if we don't understand history, we don't understand the trends, and we don't see what's coming ahead of us. So if we know what came behind us, we can see what's coming ahead of us. And you're right, this is reminiscent of 1939 Germany. Now, can we reverse it? I don't know. But what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to sit back and be ducks again? Be ducks waiting for the slaughter? Is that what we're supposed to do?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So what do you think we should do?
Oh, I don't know. I'm calling you to ask you.
What is the solution?
The community really needs to take things into their own hands. I was afraid with all this campus stuff going on that we would have more anti-Semitic activity.
You know what drives me crazy? For years I have been screaming that anytime something happens against the Jewish community, we shouldn't be meeting in buildings fortified by police and security guards. We should be standing in the middle of the street. For years I've been screaming this, that we should not be afraid and hide every time something happens to us, but we should be out there saying, hey, listen, you could attack us, but we're still a strong nation. We're still going to be fighting back, and we're not afraid of you. This is how we should be. And, it's like a bully in a schoolyard. If the bully keeps hitting a kid and the kid keeps cowering in the corner, the bully's going to keep hitting that kid. But the kid stands up and hits back, and guess what? The bully moves on to somebody else, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly. But what's really harming these days is all those female students on campuses who don't realize how aggressive those Arabs were that invaded Israel and raped and killed women. And they're still raping hostages. And yet, they prefer Hamas, to support Hamas over Hamas's behavior.
I have a feeling, and this is my feeling for a lot of these protests over the last couple of years, is that the people who are actually out there on the street, the people who are putting their bodies and their reputations on the line, don't really understand the issues that they're protesting about. So
absolutely not.
So you could ask them. I mean, if you go and ask technical questions about Hamas or technical questions about Israel, they won't be able to answer you. They have no idea.
Yes, I know.
They pick up a cause and they run with it, and they're egged on by the socialists. They're egged on by the anarchists who want to cause trouble, and so they're riled up by these people, and they're not giving any information. They're
funded. They're funded. All those tents were bought for them. All the people that took over that building at Columbia.
Yeah.
These were people who knew what they were doing.
I'd have a lot more respect for these protests if the protesters actually were protesting about something they cared about.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you so much for calling. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Howie. Bye-bye.
Bye. 1-877-669-1292 if you want to get in on the conversation. 1-877-669-1292. They don't have a clue what they're talking about, and that's the sick and sad part about it, is that they'll see a headline or they'll get a little pamphlet from the organizers, who are there for other reasons. They've co-opted this cause, and they're using this cause to push another cause. And the people standing there protesting have no clue what they're protesting against. And that's really sad when you think about it. I believe in the freedom of protest. I believe that if you actually believe in something, you want to get out there and protest it, get out there and protest. Nobody should stop you. You should have the right to protest, and you have the freedom to say what you want and do what you please. That's always the way I felt. But when you get up and you're fighting, and you're arguing, you're fighting, and you're protesting, and you're screaming, globalize the Intifada. And all these people are claimed to be peaceniks. They want peace. Ceasefire now, they yell. And then the next sentence is globalize the Intifada. Well, how could you have a ceasefire if you're globalizing the Intifada? How does that work? Okay, so the Jews have to stop shooting so you have enough time to go and kill them? Is that the way it works? Globalize the Intifada. Indiscriminate killing of Jews everywhere in the world. Let's go. Call for the end of violence and call for the continuation of violence at the same time. And these are our college students. These are our educated. This is the educated class. This is what universities are teaching them. Now, I did a show not long ago. I did a show about the universities and why the universities are like this. If you go back in the archives, you'll see it. I did a show explaining this whole thing, that this was all a setup from the KGB. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's actually been proven. And we're seeing the end result of the KGB's efforts from 1950. They started this in 1950. How do we reverse this? You have 2 generations, 3 generations of people who have grown up in university campuses believing what these radical professors have taught them. I've told you before that I used to teach Israel advocacy in a high school. And when I taught Israel advocacy in the high school, I taught it to show the Israel side of things. And I was very clear that this is a propaganda course. We're teaching the Israel side of things. And you should learn about the Israel side so that you could defend Israel when you got on the campus. And the school got a little nervous. I guess some parents might have been a little more to the left than I was, and they got a little nervous. I was a little too to the right, and so they replaced me with another guy who came in, and he started teaching. His first class was that you could be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine at the same time. There's no conflict. You could believe in an independent state of Israel, and you could believe in an independent state of Palestine at the same time, on the same land, and there's no conflict. What? If that really was true, then there would be no war. If it was actually a land war, if this was about land, then the land would have been divvied up years and years and years ago, and there would be no conflict at all there. But it's not a land war. And the Arabs keep telling us it's not a land war. Arafat said it clearly. Mahmoud Abbas has said it clearly. This is not a land war. If it was a land war, they wouldn't have expelled all the Jews from Arab countries. If this was a land war, they wouldn't have continued to attack Israel from Gaza when Israel withdrew from Gaza 100% in 2006. If this was a land war, it would be about land. But it's not about land, it's about religion. It's not about land, it's about the fact that Jews exist in the Middle East. This is all the war is about. If the Jews decided to get up tomorrow and leave the Middle East, the war would be over. If the Jews decided to convert to Islam or to live as dhimmis under Islamic rule, the war would be over. The war exists. The conflict between Arabs and Israel exists solely because the Arab countries, the Islamic countries, will not accept the fact that there is a Jewish-controlled piece of land in what they consider Muslim land. Period. And as long as that Jewish-controlled piece of land, no matter how big or small it is, so you can cut it up even more and you can make it even smaller, it doesn't really matter. No matter how big or small that piece of land is, if it's Jewish-controlled, it is the enemy, it must be destroyed. End of story. This is why they didn't accept the partition plan in 1948. This is why they did not accept any of the peace deals, which gave them 80%, 90%, even 100% of the land that they asked for, because it was never about land. If it was about land, then the Camp David Accords would have solved the problem. Ehud Barak's offer, or Ehud Olmert's offer, would have solved the problem. But it was never about land. Ehud Olmert offered 98% of all the land that Israel captured in 1967, plus Jerusalem as the capital. How could you get better than that? And they turned it down. They walked away from the table. Because it's not about land. It's not about a Palestinian state. Nobody cares about a Palestinian state. The only thing they care about is the destruction of the state of Israel and the ejection or the annihilation or the genocide of the people living there. They've said it over and over and over and over again, and the world does not want to listen. Even the Jewish community doesn't want to listen. Because you have idiots like that idiot who is teaching in a Jewish school that you could coexist. Coexistence is impossible. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Not because the Jews don't want to coexist. The Jews will coexist tomorrow. It's because the Islamists will not coexist with a Jewish-run state. They'll coexist with Jews, and that's always the fine line that they play there. We don't hate Jews. We hate Zionists. It's the fine line they play there, where they say that we could coexist with Jews. Arabs and Jews coexisted for centuries together. Yes, when Jews were a second-class citizen under Arab rule. That's when Arabs and Jews coexisted. The second the power dynamic changed and the Jews became the leaders of their own land, and the Arabs became, I wouldn't say the second-class citizens, but citizens under Jewish rule, that's when everything changed. That's when coexistence couldn't exist anymore. So the Arab superiority, the Muslim superiority, must always be over the Jewish people. Muslims should always be superior over the Jewish people. You want peace? That's the only way it's going to happen. So what's the solution? It's quite simply. In North America, the solution's easy. The Jews in North America should move to Israel. That's an easy solution. If you leave the country and they want to attack your buildings and you're no longer there, who cares? What's the solution in Israel? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It used to be controversial, but I don't think it should be controversial anymore. Maybe it is. Call in if you don't like it. The only solution in Israel is the separation of Jews and Arabs. Now, separate them any way you want to separate them, build a wall, remove them from the country, move them around, whatever. But Jews and Arabs have to be separated. They can't live together. It's toxic. It's a toxic relationship that can't last. And that's the solution in the Middle East. Build a wall, put the guards on the wall, don't let anybody pass either way. It's the only way you'll have peace in the Middle East. And even then, if there's a Jewish entity there, you'll still get the Jews being attacked by the Arabs. Because Islamic Arabs cannot accept the fact that there are Jews in the Middle East. I'm Howie Silbiger. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you again next show.